This issue is one of many, in my opinion, that's demonstrating how rapidly our world is changing and how we all have to focus on the vectors of change and their impact on our society. The pace of change is more likely to accelerate rather than slow down due to new disruptive technologies and new disruptive business models that are being created. And I think it's an important distinction to establish that we've over history had many new disruptive technologies, but in fact, new disruptive business models frequently change things a lot more pervasively and profoundly than a technology in and of itself. And I think it's quite relevant for the discussion we're having here today. For example, regarding the pace of change, as Sharon mentioned, computing power continues to advance and miniaturize. Storage capacity and retrieval is exploding. We're now talking about zettabytes of information. For those of you who aren't techies, it's a 1 followed by 21 zeros. All right, and if you can store that amount of data, you can retrieve it, and if you can retrieve it, you can massage it and manipulate it, all of which is going to show that the world has a wealth of information, maybe a poverty of attention, but a wealth of information. To give you a little bit of a grounding, I'm not even sure how capable anyone is to digest this next piece. An exabyte, which is beyond a petabyte, but less than a zettabyte, is 50,000 years worth of DVD quality video. All right, now, I don't think any of us have been around for 50,000 years, and I certainly haven't watched 50,000 DVDs, but nevertheless, it's a benchmark. So these technology breakthroughs are yielding new tools for private and public sector use. And they are also provoking new business models, as I said, in areas such as real-time analytics and privacy. It's estimated that there are today 1 billion 3G mobile phone subscribers in the world. 1 billion 3G mobile phone subscribers in the world. And this will grow to 2.8 billion in just 2014. So in a little bit over 4 years, we're going to have 3 billion people, all of whom have some capacity to manipulate, store, collect, search, lots of information wherever they are, whenever they're at. Think about the implication that has for new models of enterprise, business, government, for that matter. This trend is rapidly bringing forth a new wireless and distributed economy and lifestyle, by the way, and will present new opportunities and challenges for our government and for all of us as citizens. And I want to stress new opportunities as well as new challenges. It's a coin that has two sides. In just the privacy area alone, people's expectations and demands are evolving. And so we're seeing new companies pop up, such as Personal, which is enabling ownership, choice, personalization, and anonymity in our personal data and our digital travel, or in your capacity to have a digital me. So we have an environment and new technological and organizational developments driving the pace of change in very, very profound ways. We have a need as a society to try to find a balance between how to benefit from the new tools and greater collaboration and how to manage this change using appropriate protocols and procedures. So I am very pleased to be here, and I compliment, as I said in the beginning, the Constitution Project. I think the report's recommendations make a real contribution to how we need to begin addressing the structure and the operation of our government for the 21st century so that we can more effectively deal with the dynamics of this change that is surrounding us and will accelerate in the future.
I believe the value of a report like this is in offering a set of fair, reasonable, well-thought-out rules or proposed rules and procedures for dealing with inherent trade-offs in any governmental activity that adds significant value to the mission of the department or agency concerned, but also has the potential for compromising important other values, namely privacy. I don't think it does anyone any good to pretend that those such trade-offs do not exist. They do. And it doesn't do any good if we are squeamish about the compromises to privacy, for example, to pretend that, well, this procedure wouldn't have really done us much good in accomplishing this governmental mission anyway. That's simply not the case. Now, I'm an old counterterrorist person, so I mainly think about counterterrorist missions with regard to these sorts of issues. I hasten to point out that the report goes far beyond the subject of counterterrorism, and in fact, a number of the recommendations and issues that it addresses may have less to do with counterterrorism than other things. For example, some of the recommended disclosure requirements, some of which may simply not be practicable when it comes to things that the FBI or CIA or others involved in counterterrorism are doing. But let me make a few relevant points specifically to counterterrorism. There is no technique or set of techniques that can achieve anything close to the performance that we seem to expect from our government departments and agencies in this business. Don't be fooled by the hindsight that characterizes all of the commentary that takes place after an incident or after an attack. We are not going to have the perfection in governmental performance that we always seem to expect if you listen to that sort of commentary. So we have to use every tool available to us, and the searching or mining of data of the sort that is the subject of this report is one important set of tools. If that set of tools is not used, then after the next attack you will hear more recriminations as to why we didn't use it. Now, much of the hindsight-ridden criticism of government agencies after incidents of this type points to procedures that are data mining, or at least should be defined as data mining as addressed in the report. We're talking about particular bits of reported behavior. For example, in the underwear bomber incident almost a year ago, the bit of data about the father in Nigeria going to a U.S. embassy and asking for help in finding his wayward son. I once heard Mike Leiter, the head of the National Counterterrorism Center, comment quite appropriately that sort of item on its own wouldn't have made it to the top 1,000 things that come across his desk in the course of a week. In other words, it's meaningless unless you compare it with other data, other things in databases or sets of reporting. We're talking about searching or mining data. The so-called dot connecting that's so often retrospectively called for in these after-the-incident recriminations is basically calling for link analysis, which, as the report mentions, is another form of data mining, or at least it should be considered that for purposes of the rules and procedures that apply. One of the things that the hindsight loses sight of is that every link that seems so apparent in hindsight is really only one data point in a larger set of data. And again, you have to search or mine in order to make sense of it. Now, another basic point I want to underscore is that as far as counterterrorism is concerned, we're not mainly talking about prediction. And I would indeed propose abolishing the word prediction or predictive. I know some of my colleagues have used it. What we're talking about is in large part a matter not of predicting, but of trying to improve the odds for the good guys in confronting the bad guys in a business where there's no certainty, and we can't rely on predicting who the next terrorist or terrorist attack is going to be. It's also a matter of using tools to narrow an otherwise impossibly large and unmanageable field of information to something that can be managed. This is most apparent with regard to defensive security measures such as aviation security and the kind of profiling that is addressed in the report. The main contribution of this sort of profiling as it applies to airline passengers is not to predict who the terrorist is in the crowd, but rather to identify enough people we can be confident are not terrorists so that our other scrutiny is directed more at those that we cannot so eliminate. We actually are not very selective right now, of course, as witnessed by all the brouhaha over the body scans and the pat-downs. And a lot of people reacted to that controversy by referring, for example, to Israel's methods of screening air passengers. Well, I would describe the Israeli method as basically profiling on steroids, which they accomplish through a very intensive system of personal interviews, a system that we couldn't possibly implement here simply as a matter of scale and how many flights and how many passengers we have. And if we wanted to move in that direction of being more selective as to who is going to be subject to the really intrusive stuff, we would have to do a form of data mining to do it. Finally, I just want to make the point that there's no correct a priori answer to how to deal with these trade-offs, the ones I've discussed or any others, even ones going beyond counterterrorism. Each program, each government effort requires a separate decision regarding where to strike that balance between an objective like security from terrorism on the one hand and a value like privacy on the other. The issue is one of how much security to buy in the form of some compromise of civil liberties or privacy. And people are going to have different views on that. The consensus view among Americans, or what seems to be the consensus view at any one time on that, is going to change over time depending on what incidents occur. The important thing in view of all that is that we have a clear and orderly set of rules for making those decisions about where to strike the balance. And the decision should not be left by default to agencies like TSA, for example, whose job is not to make those decisions, but to implement the decisions. And the same is true not just of TSA, but of the rest of DHS, FBI, and the rest of the government.